What is up, guys? Today we'll be comparing the Galaxy A51 to the Moto G9 Plus. The A51 is one of the most popular, I guess, budget or mid-range phones out right now. This is a newcomer on the market, the G9 Plus. Both of these phones cost $300, so let's go ahead and get into it. So starting with the hardware, as you can see, they both have the same kind of design when it comes to the camera module. I do think the G9 Plus definitely looks a little bit better. I really like the design that they went with now. They both kind of look the same, but if you look, it has sort of like a little design inside it, and it's got the color on it, so I just really like this. But they both pretty much look the same, and the G9 Plus is definitely a little bit bigger and definitely thicker than the A51, and also a little bit heavier. So it really depends on if you like heavier phones or lighter phones. Now what you'll love about the A51's design is this psychedelic sort of shifting effect that you get on the phone. It is really nice. So both of these phones are plastic, and you have a kind of a matte finish on the G9 Plus, so you're not getting a whole bunch of fingerprint scanners a whole bunch of fingerprints like on the A51. Speaking of fingerprint scanners, the fingerprint scanner is on the power button on the G9 Plus, so it's not on the back anymore. You have your volume rockers, you have your power button on the A51 volume rockers. Also, you have a Google Assistant button on the G9 Plus as well. You do have USB Type-C on both of these phones, a headphone jack on both. The G9's is on top, and you do have a single firing speaker on both. And the A51's fingerprint scanner is actually in the display, which I really like. It's definitely a very cool feature to have. Now, it's not as fast as the physical one on the G9, but I still like the in-display fingerprint scanner a little bit more because it's just a cool feature to have, and I think it's kind of quicker to get to because you just sort of tap to turn the phone on, and then you're already in on this one. This one you kind of have to, depending on which finger you have, but again, they're both really fast and very easy to get into. They both have face unlock as well, which works extremely fast. Alright, so let's talk about the display. So this is one of the biggest differences. So on the A51, you have a 6.5 inch Super AMOLED 1080p display, 405 for the PPI, and on the G9 you have a 6.8 inch display, so it's a massive display, and it is a 1080p display as well, but it is an IPS display, 386 for the PPI. So both of these displays look great. Now what I've noticed is the A51's display is definitely more color accurate. The colors on here are just really punchy. The blacks are really deep. It's what you would expect from a Super AMOLED display. And also the punch hole is in the middle. I kind of like it in the middle, and it's actually a little bit smaller than the punch hole on the G9 Plus. But as far as display quality, they're both really great, but I do think the A51 has a slightly better display here. And as far as just brightness and stuff like that, these phones are both pretty bright, so you can take them outdoors. You won't be struggling to really see and stuff like that. So that is what I really like about both of these phones. But if you just want a bigger phone, then you would go with the G9 Plus. Obviously, you do have a little bit more bezel on the G9 Plus as well, which is not a huge deal, but alright, so both of these phones are running Android 10. Both of these phones will get Android 11. Now, Samsung is definitely more consistent with their updates as far as One UI. You get a lot of security patches and bug fixes. These Motorola phones really don't get a ton of security patches and like little updates to fix the phone. You do get them here and there, so if that's something that you're interested in, you do get that more on the One UI. But as far as software experience, again, it comes down to personal preference. I like the stock version of Android, I think, more than Samsung's UI. Even though Samsung's UI, you have a lot of additional features which will be beneficial to a lot of people. I don't really use a lot of these features, but you have the Samsung Edge. You have a lot of useful stuff in here. The screen recorder, the secured folder on here, Samsung Kids, the Edge Lightning. You have all that stuff, but if you want the more simple, cleaner stock version of Android, then you would go with the Moto G9. Now you do have the Moto actions here. You have a whole bunch of gestures you can play with, personalized stuff, and you have the chop for the flashlight, the twist for the camera. All that stuff is still here. So I like both UIs, but it really comes down again to personal preference here. So as far as the processors, you do have the Snapdragon 730G on the Moto G9, and you have Samsung's Exynos processor on the A51. Now that Exynos processor, it is a Exynos 9611. You have the Mali G72. And on the G9, again, you have the 730G and the Adreno 618. So both of these phones have micro SD support. You get 128 gigs on the G9 with 4 gigs of RAM, and you get 64 gigs on the A51 with 4 gigs of RAM. So you're getting slightly more storage on the G9 Plus. Now, before we get to the benchmarks, let's go ahead and run some real world tests here. We'll check out gaming and stuff like we always do. But let's go ahead and launch Subway Surfer. Again, looks like it's faster on the G9 Plus by a little bit actually. Faster on the G9 Plus. So you can see the Snapdragon 730G is pretty fast. Tempo run. And the A51 got it there. Let's go ahead and try YouTube. Look like a tie almost. Play Store. Tie. So these phones are kind of neck and neck. The G9 Plus was kind of beating it earlier. But as you can see, they're both very fast phones. Let's actually check out the benchmark scores and see what kind of scores we get with that. Alright guys, as you can see, we got a higher score on the G9 Plus, and we have a higher multi-core score on the G9 Plus as well. And if you check out the devices, you can see how it performs to some of the flagship and mid-range devices here. Alright, let's see which speaker sounds better. You have a single firing speaker on both. Let's go ahead, max the volume out, starting with the G9 Plus. Yeah, so the G9 Plus is definitely louder and has more bass. It definitely sounds better than the A51 speaker. Yeah, I can actually hear the 808s. You can't really hear them on here. So the G89 or what? The G9 Plus definitely louder than the A51 for sure, and sounds just a little bit better to me. Alright guys, we're in PUBG. Let's go ahead and check out the graphics and see which one will play at the highest settings. And on the G9 Plus, we can go to HD. We can't go any higher on high frame rates. On the A51, we have HDR with ultra frame rate. So slightly better on the A51 as far as frame rates. But they both look really good. They're both very smooth. So I don't have any problem with gaming on both of these guys. I think they're pretty solid. So whichever one you pick, just know, you will have slightly better performance on the A51 from what it's looking like. That might be, for some optimization reason, but that is what it is. So they both do really great. Both look great. Alright, so let's talk about some additional features before we get to the camera. So obviously both of these phones have the headphone jack. Both phones have Bluetooth 5.0 as well, and you have NFC on both of these phones as well for your mobile payments, which is very nice. So let's go ahead and talk about the cameras, starting with the G9. So on the G9 you have a 64 megapixel standard, and 8 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth. Shoots in 4K, 16 megapixel selfie camera, shoots in 1080p. On the A51 you have a 48 megapixel wide, 12 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. It shoots in 4K as well, 32 megapixel selfie camera with 1080p video. Basically the A51's camera is much better than the G9 Plus by a mile. There's just more detail, color accuracy is better, dynamic range is better, the macro and the depth sensor on the A51 is better. Everything about the cameras on the A51 is definitely better here, as you can see from these pictures. So yeah, it's an area that Motorola needs to work on. I don't know if it's with this phone in particular, because I remember the G8 was definitely a little bit better than the G9 Plus here. It's not terrible by any means, but definitely nowhere near as good as the A51, and that is the same for video as well. So if you're looking for a great camera phone out of these two, then you're definitely going with the A51 for sure. So you do have a 5,000 milliamp battery on the G9 Plus, and it is a huge battery. So you do have 30-watt fast charging, which I absolutely love. It makes the phone charge extremely fast, so I really like that. When your phone is drained, you can just plug it up and then you're good to go. You don't have to sit at the charger for a long time. So on the A51 you have a 4,000 milliamp battery with a much slower charge time, 15-watt fast charge. So basically these two phones last me all day. You definitely get a better battery life on the G9 Plus for sure. You can definitely get through a day and a half on the A51. This phone you can easily squeeze out 2 days if you're a light user. So let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys in the next video.